New York Times columnist Maureen Dowd is used to criticizing powerful people, but now she's in the crosshairs for her chummy relationship with one particular member of the Beltway elite. For nearly 25 years, Maureen Dowd has built her brand around provocative columns that tick powerful people off.
I sure hope that woman is not as cynical in all of her life as she is in her column.
But apparently, Dowd's penchant for rubbing people the wrong way doesn't apply to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. In a recent column, Dowd described Pelosi's delight over a little box of chocolates I brought her, and Pelosi's purple Manolo heels. In that same interview, Pelosi attacked the Squad's recent vote on border funding.
All these people have their public whatever and their Twitter world, but they didn't have any following. They're 4 people, and that's how many votes they got. Ooh, doggy.
Indeed. The HuffPost said Dowd's interview reads like an excerpt from The Great Gatsby, adding, maybe it's a coincidence that Pelosi chose to assail 4 women of color in an interview with a wealthy columnist. Or maybe they're both living in the same bubble. Then came this shindig that Dowd and her Times colleague Carl Hulse hosted in D.C., captured for posterity by NBC's Howard Fineman.
Tonight I tweeted a pic of a Georgetown party hosted by Maureen Dowd, attended by Speaker Pelosi, Senator Schumer, and D.C. journos.
An arrangement critics called way too cozy.
A journalist is not supposed to be hobnobbing with the very people that he is supposed to hold, accountable.
The Washington Examiner went further, saying Dowd's soiree embodies the incestuous relationship between politicians and the press in the nation's capital. But Dowd isn't buying it, writing, I, the daughter of a D.C. cop, and Carl, the son of an Illinois plumber, were hilariously painted as decadent aristocrats, reveling like Marie Antoinette. In other words, let the critics eat cake. So I don't think it really matters how blue-collar Maureen Dowd's roots are. If you reach a point where you are interacting with one of the most important people in the world you cover, the way she seems to be interacting with Nancy Pelosi, and writing week in and week out what seemed like, exceedingly pro-Pelosi columns, defending her and going after her critics, I think there's an issue here. I don't love it.
So I work in the Washington bubble. In fact, my office is in Georgetown. And
did you go to the party?
I did not go to the party, but I was not invited to the party. But let me say that kind of interaction between politicians and the press in Washington is not that unusual. I mean, look at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Look at the Gridiron Club. This is a normal kind of, you have these people in the same room all the time, and so sometimes that line gets blurred. Maureen Dowd's also an opinion columnist.
Yep.
So the expectation of her being impartial and holding people accountable and speaking truth to power is not there in the way it might be for some other journalists. That's not to excuse it. I think the optics of this are bad, and I personally think that it's hard to read her columns without taking a couple spoonfuls of salt, let alone grains of them.
But it's not just her.
But this is not unusual.
May I just contribute 2 other names to kind of broaden this a little bit? May I just say the names Sean Hannity and
He's not a
maybe
journalist,
Tucker?
though.
Well,
Neither
Maureen
are
Dowd is
journalists,
Maureen Dowd is an opinion writer. I think she writes an opinion column. She's not a news reporter, and I think there's quite a similarity there. While she's not a commentator that way. It's something that's really endemic in the business when it comes to Washington and when it comes to opinion writers. I don't see a problem with this at all.
Really?
Because I really don't.
You don't see a problem with her giving Nancy Pelosi a box of chocolates?
No.
I think that the real blur is the line between opinion and non-opinion content and how readers don't see the difference, and that's why this looks even worse. If there was a very clear line between this is the opinion section, this is the news section, people would be like, all right, of course she's pro-Pelosi, of course she's hanging out.
I want to go to the people who agree with me.
Yeah. I agree with you.
Excellent.
Let me pick up on what Lylah said when she was comparing this to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. This went on for decades, but in recent years, long before President Trump got into office, people were becoming nauseated by the spectacle of this kind of incestuous mixing of journalists and sources. And this is just another example of that. Now, I've never been a Maureen Dowd fan by any means, but I think that what was tolerated up until we're in a populist moment whether you're on the left side of the spectrum or the right side of the spectrum. We're in a populist moment, and people are starting to look at this, and if they even knew about it before and weren't troubled by it, they're certainly looking at it now and saying, what the heck is going on here? We are depending on the media to tell it to us straight, or even our opinion journalists ought to be acting independently, and instead they're all in bed with each other. So I think that's what's going on here.
So I would agree with that, but I would also add a couple of things. First of all, Maureen Dowd, I stopped reading her a long time ago because she's had some issues with racial content, period. And part of that probably has to do with, in her little circle of who she's interacting with, it probably doesn't have some people that don't look like certain folks. So therefore, her opinion is going to be shaped by that. Okay, so, but if you're going to be a broad national columnist, I think you might want to do some other passing around of some chocolates with other people if that's your modus operandi. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. The second thing I'm going to say is raise the name of Gwen Ifill. No better journalist could there be. And I saw her at a National Association of Black Journalists meeting interviewing Condoleezza Rice. She came out of the box and asked her a tough Gwen Ifill question, to which Condoleezza said, "Come on, Gwen, I just saw you at the book party on Sunday." And Gwen Ifill said to her, "We are not at the book party, and we don't have that relationship now." Now to my question, Secretary.
Yep.
So that is the relationship you're supposed to have. Nothing wrong with drinking a couple chocolates or sharing some chocolates, but when it comes down to it, Secretary, I ask you a question, and we ain't at the book party. That's Gwen Ifill.